haven't paid for them. Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And good to see you, John. Not that I can see you at the moment. I can only see Nigel. Are you there, John?
I'm there, Stephen. I'm here.
Good.
I'm here.
Good.
I'm holding the fort at home.
Right. Well, before we start, as everybody's going to spend the whole afternoon peering at it, you better explain to us what's hanging from that girder up on the ceiling there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It's picture frames, because I'm in a little studio, which is my wife Renara's studio, where she does her painting, and she paints portraits in watercolour. And just dangling up there are sort of picture frames and frames for paintings. So a bit unusual, and it would take a bit of guessing, but that's what's going on. And right in the background are one or two watercolours which you can't quite see, because I'm in the way. There we are. So there we are. That's the mystery.
Well, let's talk about the Test match to start with, John, because we've all been deprived of cricket for so long, and then we had this treat of a game at Southampton. So first game of the season, you're straight into a Test match. That's strange, isn't it?
It couldn't have been more unusual. And oddly, although it was July, the conditions right at the beginning, first day when there wasn't much play, and the second day were very much more akin to a sort of muggy, overcast, slightly damp day in perhaps May or early June. So it was very much pre-season stuff for the players, who wouldn't have had match practice, although of course they'd been practicing very hard for the match. But there's a world of a difference, in my view, to net practice compared with proper match practice. And to be absolutely honest, it showed, but it produced the most wonderful game of cricket on what, congratulations to Southampton, on what to me looked to be a very, very good Test match pitch, or cricket pitch, encouraging all sorts of cricket, batsmen, faster bowlers, medium fast bowlers, and indeed spin, because it was clearly quite dry as well. So it had a bit of everything, but of course, Stephen, it didn't really have too much crowd noise.
No. Well, now before we come on to the crowd, tell me a bit more about what is, when you say it looked a bit rusty at the beginning of season type of cricket, what were you spotting that made you think that?
Well, I just remember early season matches. It takes time for both batsmen and bowlers to get into their rhythm, to get into their stride in a season. And I thought it was very apparent that the England batting, particularly batting first in tricky conditions, never quite found its rhythm, never found its true potential, and therefore fell, 80, perhaps 100 runs short of what they were worth. And that made all the difference in the end. The West Indian bowlers, by contrast, did seem to come, if you like, out of the traps extremely well, and particularly bowled an excellent, in my view, an excellent length for the conditions. They didn't bowl too short or just back of a length. They bowled that slightly fuller English style length, which asks questions, particularly with a bit of swing, a little bit of movement, and it did catch many of the England batsmen. It caught them out a little bit in what I would call an early season batting exercise, in which they didn't really find their rhythm. And indeed, the England batting, although improved in the second innings, didn't quite find its rhythm there. It was slightly saved towards the end, which made it respectable, made a reasonable, if not enough, target to set the West Indies. But it was a fascinating game, intriguing match. Could have gone either way. I think the one other thing. Yes, sorry, Stephen. Yes.
Yeah. No. Let's just switch for a second, because the umpires had quite an active match as well.
Yeah.
And is there a sense that umpires need to get into a season? Is dropping an umpire into the middle of a Test match, having not stood in the middle for 4 months, quite challenging for them?
Yes. Well, we'd have to ask the umpires that. But I do remember back in the day when I was playing, that umpires frequently used to say to me, David Shepherd, particularly Ray Julian, I remember, saying how very useful they found it, having a match or two, maybe at Cambridge, perhaps at Oxford, perhaps a second 11 game, a minor counties game, just to get into the rhythm, even if it was counting the balls from the stones from one pocket to the other in the old-fashioned sense. It's all rhythm, you know. And in actual fact, I think Richard Illingworth and Richard Kettleborough, I think it was, who are very fine umpires and very, very good people. They had a tough match anyway, because there's so many decisions to make. And they made them to the very best of their ability. And Stephen, I think, and for everyone watching, always remember, when we watch it on television, even in fast motion, before they slow it down, the game happens 5 times quicker than that. It's so quick. You know, if you watch a Federer serve at Wimbledon on television, you sort of think you can get it back. If you're actually at Wimbledon, lucky enough to be at Wimbledon, you can't believe that anybody ever gets it back. Well, you know, it's a bit the same with cricket. These fast bowlers who are jolly fast, you know, Archer and Wood bowled very fast, and the West Indians bowled very fast. It happens so quickly. So it's very tough for the umpires. I think they have to get into rhythm. I think they did very well, and I didn't think they lost their confidence despite decisions being overturned by the third umpire, Michael Gough, who I thought had a terrific game. Gosh, who would, hands up, I can't see everyone, who would want to be the third umpire? I mean, I would. It's such a tough role. And Michael was so calm and so composed. Will you run it back a little bit, please? And so polite. Would you run it back a little bit forward? And I thought he had a star role. And in the end, Stephen, actually, you pointed this out to me yesterday. In actual fact, I think in the end, all the correct decisions just about came to pass.
Yes, I think so. Yes. Well, let's before we go on to the lack of a crowd, which I do want to talk about, let's digress into your career, fast bowling. You opened the batting quite a lot for Sussex, so you played against them all in that period when all the best overseas players were running in full steam in county games.
Yes. Who
were the ones who were the hardest to face for you?
Oh, goodness me. I think probably the very first encounter of real pace and superb bowler, I think was Andy Roberts. I think Andy Roberts would be the tip-top clever bowler too, tip-top bowler. And when we faced Andy Roberts, we didn't have a helmet. We had a thigh pad. And a box and no arm guard. You know, we weren't going out in a suit of armour. So I suppose that made it a little bit different.
It probably didn't accept your email address, you see. Can you find it?
Somebody's having a conversation in here.
Hello?
Hello?
Are we there?
Yeah, we're back.
There again? So I'll go back to so Andy Roberts was certainly very fine bowler. The real accuracy of Richard Hadley, because he never let you away somehow. And against what I call average player, let's call myself average player rather than superb player, I was never really able to get on top of them. They bowled with great accuracy and pace. And then just thinking of a different type of bowler, Mike Proctor. Mike Proctor was both fast and swung the ball in with this very odd action. And he was a really difficult handful. And he ran in with hostile intent, I would say. So he was quite intimidating while not being particularly tall, like a Joel Garner, but he ran in and bowled these big in-swingers. So I used to find slightly complicated bowlers a bit trickier. But yes, you're so right, Stephen. In those days, we did, and I'm so proud to have at least had a go against these people. We did play against then, I would say, the best bowlers, the best cricketers actually, overseas cricketers in the world. And that was a great honour, because if you were sort of average cricketer, not likely to play international cricket, that was your one chance of having a go against the very best in some conditions that weren't always all that easy. And every now and then, if I stick into my memory, one had a good day or a good half day.
Was there one occasion when you were completely blown away as a team by Wayne Daniel?
Gosh, Wayne Daniel. I mean, at least he wasn't complicated. He was very fast, and he ran into bowl down the hill at Hove in a Benson and Hedges match. I'm going for 1978. It was a Benson and Hedges qualifying match in May, very cold, green pitch. Mike Brearley put us in bat, and Daniel raced down the hill. And I'm guessing he took about, let's say he took about 6 for 17.
Well, now, John, I'm all set up here. I've got a computer behind my screen ready to contradict you. I've got the score open now. JRT Barclay bowled Daniel 17. Top score in the innings.
And about 9th player to get out.
Daniel, 9 overs, 6 for 17.
Oh, I wasn't far off, was I?
You were exact.
And he bowled really fast. And I remember I opened the batting with Gian Mendes. Put me right, Stephen, when I get this wrong. I opened the batting with Gian Mendes. Gian, who was a fine player of quick bowling, superb wristy player. And I think he cut a ball early on, possibly the first over, and was caught at cover point, possibly for naught. You have to put me right there, but possibly for naught. And then into the battle came Stuart Storey, making his debut for Sussex from Surrey, of course, coming in at number 3 to sort of rescue Sussex. And he got a ball that hit his bat handle, then his head, and then no helmet, then his head, and it cannoned up to cover point, which I think might have been Norman Featherstone or someone like that, who caught the catch. So Storey then just about staggered off the pitch, out first ball for naught, and he then was taken to hospital to check on his head. And as he walked out, one rather unsympathetic member of the Sussex crowd, which was rare for Sussex, shouted, "Oi, Storey, why don't you go back and play for Surrey?" A little bit unkind.
Next man in is Peter Graves.
Oh, God, what? Oh, that was awful. Now, Peter came in next and we were battling away. We did quite well for a bit, you know, for about 2 overs. And Peter was actually facing Mike Selvey from the sea end, you know, basically like a spinner compared to Wayne Daniel. And he got a really mean, awful ball, which reared off the length, hit him on his finger. And I walked down to see Peter and I said, "How is it, Peter?" And he was trying to get his glove off. And he got his glove off and his poor finger was in a frightful state and all over the place. And I said, "Peter, I don't think that looks all that good. And I fear you might have to go and see how Stuart Storey is getting on in hospital." And which indeed he did. And it was, and poor Peter never recovered from that broken finger. But ironically, it was Mike Selvey, who was a very good bowler, but not as fast, obviously, who actually hit the finger so hard. It wasn't Wayne Daniel. Wayne Daniel did the rest of the damage. And I remember I was so keen, later, I was still in somehow, later in the innings, getting back and across bravely and heroically. And I got too far across and in fact ended up having my leg stump extracted. rather than my off stump. And that was the end of me. And I remember Ian Gould was wicket-keeping for Middlesex before he joined Sussex, obviously. And he was very kind as I walked off, and he did say something along the lines, there might have been some slightly dodgy language in the middle, along the lines of what a very brave innings that was, except he might have used an alternative word to very.
Oh, is that the worst session of cricket you've taken part in?
I think one of the most dramatic. But you know, Stephen, the funny thing is, I look back on it now, sitting looking at the garden today, and I feel so honoured to have been part of it. Because Wayne Daniel running down the, you know, it's become a story, running down the hill at Hove, really fast bowling. And I just feel honoured to have played a part. And I was only about, how old was I? I was only about 24. I was sort of seemed early days at the time. I was quite early days. And of course, you're less frightened when you're young. Experience is a dodgy thing with fear. It tends to exaggerate fear. When you're inexperienced and a young whippersnapper, like being a little child or whatever, fear doesn't cross your path quite so strongly. So honestly, truly, I was not brave because I don't think I suffered fear during that little spell, other than the fear of getting out, which I suffered all the time.
Yes, and you did have an encounter with Jeff Thompson on one occasion, playing Sussex against Australians, I believe.
Oh, it's such a joy to be reminded of these golden moments. Stephen, I did. That was much later. That was in the sort of more the twilight of my not very illustrious career. I think it was 1985 Australian tour. And Sussex were playing Australia. In those days, as everyone will remember, the tourists played all the counties, or nearly all the counties, as part of a 4-month tour, Ashes tour. 1985, Sussex were playing Australia at Hove, and it was our first ever experimental 4-day match. It was a 4-day match, quite exciting. And Australia batted and got whatever they got, and we went into bat, and I batted about number 5 or something. I didn't open for some reason, probably because Jeff Thompson was bowling, but I was captain. You may have it there. I had a choice of where to bat. Anyway, I went in the middle order. Have a look, Stephen. You might find it.
I'm finding it while you're talking. Carry on.
Right, and. So Australia batted and maybe made 300. We went into bat. We were doing quite well for us, and I was batting, and we were doing so well that Australia had to take the second new ball. Now that was something not encouraged too much in Sussex because you know, Sussex weren't particularly financially well off, and we were rather anti anybody taking the second new ball unless it really had to happen. Anyway, Australia, Alan Border, I think, was captain, took the second new ball. Have a look, see who was captain. I can't remember that.
Yeah, I think Hilditch. It's Hilditch.
There we are. Could have been. And anyway, took the second, and Jeff Thompson took the second new ball. The first ball was a swinging half volley outside my off stump, which I lashed at bravely. And I got a sort of top edge, and the ball looped up over gully, and with the spin on a fast outfield, spun away for 4 runs. And as Thompson followed through, I could detect a hostile, menacing look in his face, the type of which I rather wished I hadn't played that shot at edge of ball. And he took a longer run for his second ball. In he came, dug it in. I went back and across, and somehow the ball, I don't know whether you can see, but the ball got through, and it hit me on the side of my face, sort of around the teeth area, and I was felled. So I collapsed heroically to the ground. And Kepler Wessels, who had played for Sussex and subsequently captained South Africa, was at the time playing for Australia. So he was a man who came up to me. He was what I call fairly unsure of his own identity. He came up to me and he said, "John, how are you?" And I said, "Well, not great, Kepler, but very kind of you to ask." Because it's not something that Australians do, but of course he's not Australian. And he then said, "Well, I suggest that you declare." And so I said, "Kepler, that's a very good idea, because then I'll get a not out and it'll be good for my average," which was never very good. And so we declared, and I think I had scored 37.
Yes, you had.
There you go. And so walked off the field. At the top of the steps at Hove, I encountered a very nice man called John Samways, who was at the time acting as a sort of a part-time, occasional chaplain to the club. So we had a chaplain to try and say prayers, because we thought that might help Sussex's cause, if nothing else. And the chaplain looked at me, and I was expecting some warm words from a man well accustomed to visiting people in hospital and that sort of thing. I was expecting warm words, and John looked at me and he said to me, "John," he said, "if you'd just gone back and across a bit further and got your hands a bit higher, I think you'd have been all right." And he left me with that. And that was the end of that story. And then the match progressed, and it was a very good game of cricket, which actually we, Sussex, just saved, I think, with 9 wickets down, with Bob Holland. I wonder who can remember Bob Holland, the leg spinner, known as Dutchy Holland, not surprisingly. Bob Holland got wickets in probably 5 or 6 wickets, Stephen, in the second innings, and nearly four wickets. And we managed to stave off defeat to Australia in an excellent 4-day match. So there we are. Sorry, that took an awful long time to get there. It was just a matter of getting hit by Thompson. Sorry about that, everyone. That's
all right. But then you had Imran on your own team. How would he rate among that group of fast bowlers, Imran? Where would you place him?
Imran would rate very, very highly. Fortunately, I didn't often face Imran. I faced him once at Oxford, and once when he was playing for Worcester, when he got me out bowled. But he bowled much slower then. He bowled big sort of Proctor-like in-swingers in the early days, off a proper action. And then he sort of developed his action. Funny enough, I think John Snow was a great help to Imran, gave him lots of advice and thoughts on developing his action into this wonderful action, a big jump and then follow through. And Imran became, firstly, pretty fast, and secondly, he had the ability, which is rare, to swing the ball both ways at pace. Malcolm Marshall could do the same, and Malcolm Marshall unusually did it from a quite open action, but he managed to swing the ball both ways, and pretty quick too, both off a short run and off a longer run. And Imran the same. I mean, it's very difficult comparisons. I mean, Marshall, Imran, you're talking about 2 of the absolute great tip-top world fast bowlers in their era. But we had Imran in our team for a bit, and that was fairly handy. I was very pleased about that. And he
was he somebody who was always in the mood, or did you have to get him in the right mood as a captain?
Well, I like to boast and pretend that I very much had to get him in the right mood. But actually, you know, Imran was very proud of his performance because he knew that every performance, batting or bowling, the news would get quickly back to Pakistan, and he was very proud of producing effective performance. He trained very hard. He practiced as hard as anyone that I know. He really did practice hard. And so he wasn't that difficult to get going. I suppose I amused him a little bit by being very English. Now, Imran, to be fair, was quite English. I mean, he went to school in Worcester Grammar School, I think it was, and then to Oxford. So although he came from Pakistan, from Lahore, Imran, and he went to Aitchison College there. That's pretty English, I can tell you. You know, he was quite English. I was very English. So he appreciated things like, so I'd walk back with him as he was walking back to bowl occasionally. And I'd say, Imi, I'd say, because we were quite mates, Imi, I'd say, could you bear the thought of bowling just one more over? And he appreciated the sentiment. And and I used to say just, and he used to look at me and said, oh no, I am so tired. And I said, but if you bowl one more over, you just might take another wicket. And if we take another wicket, we'll win this match sooner rather than later. And then you'll have more time off to get back to London. So that was sort of incentive. Does that count as captaincy? Not really. It's not very tactical or strategic, is it? But that was the sort of chit-chat that we had. And
now, there was an occasion down in Taunton when Viv Richards was batting, when I think Imran suggested the best way to get him out was for you to have a bowl. Is this correct?
Well, that was an awful day. Stephen, you know, all these frightful, terrible moments of my life. We were playing this was a Sunday League match, 40 over Sunday League match on a very hot day. I can't remember which year, but both teams were up there. We were up at the top of the table, both teams, surprisingly.
I think if you'd won that game, you'd have won the championship, the Sunday League.
Oh, yes. You're making it even worse, Stephen.
Yeah.
Things
right at the end of your career, wasn't it? Yes.
It was terrible. Anyway, Sunday League match, 40 over game, Taunton, and a hot day, big crowd, and we take a wicket. Someone gets someone out. Somerset bat first. I don't know. Maybe they didn't. It doesn't matter. Can't remember. But
no, I think
anyway,
you batted, but you must be batting first because they're in a run chase, aren't they?
You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm getting it wrong. No, we had batted. So that's right. We had batted first. They were chasing. We took a wicket. And we all actually collectively thought this was a bad idea, really, because it was going possible. Because Viv had the potential to spoil Sunday afternoon if you were playing, not for the crowd, but for us, the opposition. And we took a wicket. Viv came swaggering in from the pavilion. He swaggered in, looking very confident and quite big. And Imran potted over to me as captain. And he said, Johnny, I think you should bowl. And I said, good heavens, or something like that. He says, Viv sometimes has a weakness against spin early on. Well, we all know, all 107 people watching and listening to this know that that's complete drivel. And how on earth he's now ended up as Prime Minister of Pakistan, I don't know. It's complete tosh. Anyway, I fell for it, and I put myself on at the pavilion, the pavilion end, the new pavilion end. I call it new because I think, but at the pavilion end, and to bowl at Viv before he got going. And the very first ball I bowled, he took one step down the pitch and he hit the ball straight over my head. And before I'd had time to turn around, I heard a splash. And the ball had landed in the River Tone, which flows, I don't know whether you know this, everyone, but it flows just behind the wall, as it was then, before there was stand there and everything, and splash into the river, surprising the Sunday afternoon fishermen. And the ball, which floated, because it's made of cork, which floated, was lobbed back over the wall, wet. And it came back to me. And I bowled the next ball with this wet ball. And it wasn't as bad, honestly, truly, believe me, everyone, it wasn't, they weren't bad balls, they weren't awful. You can talk, when Vic comes on next time, you can ask Vic. And the next ball, nice decent ball, straight back over my head again into the river, splosh. which by this time the fishermen are getting quite cross because they wish for a peaceful afternoon, because peace, that's what fishing is. Anyway, the over went for, I think, Stephen, you might have, I think 28.
No, don't exaggerate. 26.
Oh, the over went for 26 runs. I mean, not a record. Things could be worse. One of the balls, he actually slightly mishit, would you believe? And Paul Phillipson, out in the deep, everyone was in the deep by now, in the deep, actually caught the catch, but fell back over the boundary, having caught the catch. Another 6. And at the end of the over, Viv walked down to me, and he used to knock the top of his bat handle like that, and not walked down. He said, "John," he said, and I thought it was rather charming actually. He said, "John, just remember, without bowlers like you, I'd never have been the great player I am today." So that was the end of the story. And the over went to 26. We lost the match very comfortably. Stephen's probably